They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And we said, you know what, let's look around and find the happiest woman that we could possibly find. And we looked and we looked and we looked, and we're like, you know what? There is no happy honorary woman than Wendell Husebo. He joins us. He is the politics reporter for Breitbart. And I just kid you, Wendell, because we do have men on this program too. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do at Breitbart, all of what you follow and bring to us as readers. And thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's jump into it because there is so much going on. We've got the last week of Joe Biden. We have the incoming Trump administration. We're less than a week away as we record this from the inauguration. Lots going on. But of course, this week's big story are the confirmation hearings. And as we sit together on Tuesday, Pete Hegseth has just completed his first confirmation hearing, hopefully the only one necessary. And you've got Doug Collins, Doug Burgum, who are also scheduled for today, many others scheduled for the week ahead. Tell us what you think first on Pete. I thought his performance was pretty solid. You had a lot of showboating, as you could expect, but how do you think he did with all of the criticism and all the crazy stories that were swirling around this hearing?
I thought that the reviews overall were very good. Even from the Democrat side, you can really tell by just scrolling through Twitter that there were really no big mistakes, no errors, nothing that really was a terrible soundbite. So I think he's going to pass with flying colors, and I would expect him, to lead the DOD in the future.
So I was really struck, and I should not be surprised by this, but one of the things that really galled me was the hypocrisy of the Democrats. So in the opening statement from Senator Jack Reed, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, he's a Democrat from Rhode Island, I just thought it was so choice when he said, we need a Secretary of Defense who's nonpartisan. I mean, seriously. So I don't know. Tell me, what were some of your sort of highs and lows from the hearing? Were there any moments that really stood out for you?
Well, first, I think it's really a myth that's put out by the Democrat Party that cabinet nominees should be nonpartisan. It's the prerogative of the elected president to select his nominees and put them in cabinet positions to, carry out the wishes of the president and to run the United States government. And so it's a whole complete misdirection play that Democrats have consistently used now since, early 20th century to say like, oh, wow, these civil servants, really just shouldn't be partisan. The whole point is to appoint political appointees, get people in positions to run the government in accordance with the president's wishes. And by the way, all the voters selected or voted for the president. And so the voters are, knowingly are ready for a new government. And so when it comes to Pete Hegseth, I think he's gonna do great. He had a lot of hot exchanges, and just shows that he's a very smart guy, can think on his feet, and I think he's gonna do a very good job.
A lot of people criticized him because he was, and I'll use air quotes here for those of you not watching us, the Fox News guy. But I think what that experience brings is that when he was starting to get some of the crazy stuff from some of the more liberal senators, the way he just sort of sat there and took it and kind of smiled back, and you could kind of see what was on his face. His composure, I thought, was really quite incredible. And Wendell, I've said this before, probably here to Katie and to all of you listening, but I really felt like Pete Hegseth was a line in the sand for President Trump. After they were able to get Matt Gaetz out of the way with some of the reporting, and maybe Matt Gaetz knew that those ethics reports were going to come out, and he stepped aside. When they made Pete Hegseth their next target, I really felt strongly that President Trump stay with him. Of course, there are other people who could do a great job in that position, but you can't let them pick people off. Did you see Pete Hegseth as sort of the line in the sand that if they had run him off and out, that they would have continued to go down the list of President Trump's nominees?
When Matt Gaetz dropped out of the running, I wrote an article the next day that said that Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth were going to be the next targets of the establishment media, because what you saw is Trump rolled out these cabinet picks, and the media immediately jumped on Matt Gaetz, was, pummeling him with negative news. And so when he dropped out, they naturally switched towards their next target, which was, Pete Hegseth and Gabbard. And so I think Pete Hegseth really calmed the waters today. Like I said, there was nothing that really came out of this hearing. And by the way, these hearings didn't always used to take place. This is, something that began in the early 20th century. Many cabinet nominees have just been given an up or down vote on the Senate floor. This whole process is really just a big politicization for, the senators to be on camera and say this or say that, and, then go out and try to fundraise money for their next election.
So I wanted to ask you, because you pay really close attention to what goes on the Hill. I tend to be more focused on what's happening in Fairfax County. So I'm not always so familiar with a lot of the members of Congress or the Senate. But one person whose questioning really stood out for me, actually wasn't really a question, it was a great statement, was Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. So he was elected a senator from Oklahoma he was elected in 2022 in a special election when Inhofe left the Senate, and he's been in office since 2023. First Native American senator since like the 1920s, which I thought was really interesting.
I thought that was Pocahontas.
Well,
that's Pocahontas.
Yes, we've since learned that she is Pocahontas. But he came out with this really beautiful, it was actually a really moving, beautiful statement, but very strong, where he called out the hypocrisy of the senators for, whose behavior here is perfect. I don't think so. And he talked about, who hasn't shown up for work having drunk too much.
But you so quickly forget about that. And then Senator Kaine, or I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No, but it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy, because the man's made a mistake.
But is he somebody that has he registered on your radar screen before, or was this sort of a breakout moment for him?
Well, the Senate as a body is typically more quiet, more genteel, more reserved. It's the deliberative body. When you compare the senators to House members, the House is more of a zoo. They are louder, they're bolder, they say more, brazen things. And so on the Senate side, when you're watching these hearings, the fact that there's a little bit of jostling around for the Senate, it's a big deal. It's like, wow, I can't believe they would say that in the Senate chambers. Wow. But the reality is that there was a lot of good, solid Republicans on that committee. And one of the Democrats said, something like, oh, did you pass out at on a bus drunk, or there was something like that. And then Mullins came back and said, senators, have you ever showed up to a Senate vote drunk? And, that got a loud applause in the Senate chamber, or Senate committee hearing chamber. And so that just goes to show you the hypocrisy that we see between the holier than thou Democrats and, just normal Americans that are living out their lives in Fairfax County or any county in the nation.
Mark Wayne Mullen is an interesting one because he's one of the ones that actually got Gates out. He had no love lost with Gates, I believe. And he's, if I'm not mistaken, maybe one of not only the first Native American, but maybe the first person to challenge someone to a fist fight on the floor of the Senate. Didn't he? I think that happened, Wendell. He's definitely an interesting one to watch, but we'll move on from there. Now, there's some other hearings that have not been scheduled. You wrote in Breitbart yesterday about the 13 that are coming this week, but there are a few people who are still awaiting their confirmation hearing dates. One of them, Kash Patel, you mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's still waiting for her date, as well as RFK Jr. You touched on it, but let's jump into it. Does Pete Hegseth's performance today help those three? I guess we'd put them in the more controversial camp. Not controversial to me, but I think to some. Does that help them along to get those hearing dates solidified? And do you think this is maybe just a lot to do about nothing here? Because if Pete Hegseth can get through as he did, do we think there's just smooth sailing ahead for some of these nominees or most of them? I
think from the perspective of the media, a lot of it is about momentum. And if you're, the establishment media, you're trying to prevent these people from gliding through. And with Pete Hegseth's good performance today, because they focus so much on him, the media hasn't done very much work on the other ones. And so if you get the first one through, that's strong momentum for President Trump. And so I would anticipate that the other ones will also glide through just like Pete Hegseth. We will see if, the other nominees, sit there and take the questions and take the beating. And, it's a 4-hour grilling. It's not easy to sit there and listen to, silly Democrats, tell you untruths. You have to smile and say, yes, Senator, no, Senator, this is what it is. And so, these nominees will train for this. They'll study, material and they'll go up there with a good attitude and, we'll just see what comes of it. But it's mainly a public spectacle. It's mainly for the senators to look good. And so, we hope at Breitbart News that, these nominees, represent President Trump's agenda. And I anticipate they will.
I actually think it makes for great television. I have to say, it is way better than The View. It is way better than just about anything else that Hollywood can puts out. So I really commend it to people. These hearings, I think, show us a lot about these characters, the ones who are being interviewed, but as well as it shows a lot about our representatives. I think it really helps you to see who they are, which I think is very important. So I recommend to people to watch these hearings. You can watch them on C-SPAN and they're great. So we've got some really good ones coming up. The next few days are going to be some very good watching. We've got Kristi Noem tomorrow, Pam Bondi, Marco Rubio. We've got John Ratcliffe, who's been nominated to be the director of the CIA. What do you expect from some of these hearings? Which ones do you think will be sort of the most fiery or the most interesting?
For me, the most interesting is going to be Russ Vought, who's nominated for OMB director. The OMB is kind of the nucleus of, the way that the money is approved and spent through the federal agencies. And so it's Donald Trump's stated plan that, he's going to be controlling the purse strings a little bit. And so which means that a lot of the employees that are working in these federal agencies, maybe they're going to have their budgets cut, maybe their jobs will be slashed. And so you've heard of Vivek and Musk going in and going to be a part of, reforming the federal bureaucracy, but those two men are going to be working in tandem with potentially Russ Vought. And so I think that committee hearing will be very interesting to watch.
All right. So I have a couple of other questions for you, but before we get out of the hearing mode, there's a lot of anticipation for Pam Bondi as well, that replacement for Matt Gaetz, who will be sitting on Wednesday to start her hearing. What's the controversy around her, Wendell? This is one I can't understand. Yes, she's been an advocate for President Trump, but she has literally done the job in Florida. I would think this should be kind of an easy one, sort of like Marco Rubio should be kind of an easy one, I would think, for Secretary of State.
I think Pam Bondi seems to have a lot of experience. I'm interested to hear kind of how she answers the question. She did come in, as a nominee after Gates, but she's had a lot of media experience. She's had a lot of legal experience. She was Attorney General of Florida, the state that I'm originally from. And so I anticipate her to, pass with flying colors. But again, she does have to sit there and listen for 4 hours to the Democrats, to say untruths, and, she's going to have to respond. And so, it's a process that she has to go through. But it will be an interesting one simply because she is, Matt Gaetz's replacement. And there was just so much attention on the Attorney General position. And, the DOJ is one of those agencies that needs a massive overhaul because of the weaponization of government that's happened over the past 4 years.
I'm glad you brought up the seriousness with which this administration is taking its commitment to cutting the budget, cutting the fat, cutting the waste. I thought it was so interesting that Melania Trump, in her recent interview, even said that she's cutting back the size of the First Lady's office, which I think is actually a really promising sign. We're seeing signs of this already in just the early planning phases for when President Trump comes into office. So I don't know, you think about something like Russ Vought and the Office of Management and Budget as being like, that is so nerdy. Who cares what goes on over there? But you're absolutely right to draw attention to that as that's going to be really, really pivotal. And I think, the other thing that I think is going to cause a lot of fireworks is that I think Trump will also focus on the ability to fire federal workers. I mean, he has said again and again, getting a job with the federal government should not be a guarantee of a job for life, which is what it currently is. And so I think that's another area that's going to change. So I just can't wait to see. Where do you think we will see the first round of executive orders? Will that happen once he's in the White House? Am I wrong, or did he make a joke about having a tiny desk in front of the Capitol to sign his first executive orders? Did I dream that, or did that really happen?
I didn't see that, but that would be very cool if that happens.
So will he? Do you think? After what's going to happen on Monday? We'll have the inauguration, the parade. Then does he straight away go into the White House and start signing?
Well, I think after he's inaugurated, there's going to be the parade in the afternoon, and then there's the balls, and there's the presidential ball. I'm sure he'll attend the presidential ball with Melania, and then the day after that, I'm sure he's going to be right there in the Oval Office, hard at work. Executive orders may flow after he does take the oath of office on Monday at noon. But I would really suspect that, on Tuesday will be the big day when a lot of executive orders are rolled out. And I would expect a lot of those executive orders to be about immigration, securing our southern border.
I think it almost has to be. And a lot of people are anticipating, and I'm really curious to know what you've been hearing. I haven't been hearing a lot about this. President Trump has said that he's going to review the cases of the January 6th prisoners. And I think that's important. Obviously, you have to go through each and every one and have your team do that, because there are some people who did things wrong that needed punishment. And then there are people who are literally being held as political prisoners. And in some cases, both of those things are true. I haven't heard a lot about those case reviews happening now already, because I think there are a lot of people expecting some big announcements on day one or in the early days of the Trump administration. Are you hearing that there's work underway to review those cases, or do you think that's something that might come later on?
There is work being done to review those cases. I'm not sure what type of work or how in depth it is, or how they're evaluating the cases, if they're just drawing a line in the sand here or there. But a lot of these January 6th defendants have been treated so poorly, and many of them have already served a lot of time. And so I think it's important that when we think about pardoning these defendants, we think about how long have they actually been in prison, regardless of what they're accused of committing or what they are convicted of committing. It's a tough political decision because the media is going to, jump on it immediately, and the establishment media will jump on it immediately and say, oh, Trump's a terrible guy. He's pardoning, convicted felons. But you just have to remember that the Biden administration has weaponized the justice system. And if Donald Trump would not have won the presidency, he himself would be in prison.
So speaking of people being in prison, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'd love to know, what do you think are the chances that people will be held accountable? Because I think one of the things that drives me crazy is, first of all, not just the way that Biden's DOJ has been weaponized in the way, and other agencies as well. It's not just the DOJ, the way they have gone after our side, but also the way on the Democrat side, when wrongdoing has been uncovered, people just seem to get off scot-free. I mean, the obvious name that jumps into my mind is Peter Strzok, and Lisa Page. That's another name, right? But there are so many others where it's been discovered that they did things really, I would say, breaking all the rules, things that were illegal, potentially even things that were treasonous. Do you get the sense that under Trump, there will be sort of a pursuit of justice, an effort to maybe hold people accountable for some of the things that they did? Or do you think Trump's just going to want to look forward and leave the past behind?
I think it just depends on the circumstance. My personal position is I hope Trump follows through on every single promise he's made. Some promises are going to be harder to follow through than others. There's going to be people that are going to try to stop him. We still have to work with Democrats and pass legislation. There has to be some sort of give and take on things. But I do have great hope that Donald Trump follows through on his promises, because the things that he's promised, like securing the southern border, they have to get done, or else, in his words, we're not going to have a country anymore.
Mm. In that same vein, I was reading some of the pieces that you have out right now at Breitbart. One of them is about the report. It was a small report that was released yesterday by David Weiss, special counsel, about Hunter Biden. And we know about the pardons from Joe Biden. We know that there are a lot of people who would love a preemptive pardon from Joe Biden. Do you anticipate him doing those? Question number one. And what about Hunter, as President Trump would say? Where's Hunter? There's so much there. And we also know that Jim Jordan's going to start an investigation into the investigators around Hunter Biden. I mean, it is so messy and convoluted under the Biden administration. Shed some light on what you've heard about that. And of course, David Weiss is reporting as well.
Yeah, so we have two issues going on here. The first issue is a special counsel delivered his report on his Hunter Biden investigation. Weiss prosecuted him for gun and tax violations, but there are a lot of other violations that Republicans have alleged that Hunter Biden has committed, such as violating FARA, and even prostitution. These are allegations that many Republicans believe Hunter Biden should be prosecuted for. And then we have a situation where Joe Biden is willy-nilly just pardoning everybody under the sun. And so it raises a lot of questions of who's next. Is it going to be the January 6th chair, Benny Johnson? Is it going to be Liz Cheney? Is it going to be Mark Milley? Is he going to pardon himself? I think he said Joe Biden said he's not going to pardon himself. But the question remains, Joe Biden's going to be president for, I guess, 6 more days today. We're taping on a Tuesday. And so we're going to stay tuned and see what happens. But on the Hunter Biden front, it is true. Jim Jordan confirmed to us at Breitbart that he is going to investigate David Weiss's investigation. And I think that there's a lot more to uncover there, because you have all of this money moving around all of these shell companies into family bank accounts. I mean, how is it that Joe Biden's grandchildren received proceeds from the Biden family business and no one's looking into that? I mean, what work did they perform? I mean, there's just so many questions to uncover moving forward.
So I'm going to be at the inauguration on Monday. It's going to be cold, but I think I'm definitely going to go. But I am curious.
You'll be warm on the inside, Katie. You'll be warm on the inside.
I'll be so happy I won't notice how cold I am. I was there 8 years ago, and I just remember walking with Sebastian from the Capitol over back to the White House to go to the parade, and we walked kind of right past that great big group of, quote, black clad individuals, right? Covered head to toe in black, faces covered, who were, breaking store windows, destroying cars. I mean, it was kind of a scary time. And I've had people, just this morning had somebody say to me that their friends were not going to go to the inauguration this time around because they were nervous about safety issues. I actually think it's going to be much better than 8 years ago, because I think the city is going to be much better prepared. I think Washington will not let happen again what happened then. But I'm curious, because Breitbart is right up there in the Capitol. You're there all the time. What are you seeing around D.C.? What are you hearing as far as preparations for the inauguration? And do you think it's going to be safe? Do you think anybody can go?
I anticipate it to be very safe. I don't foresee any, violence. With that said, there could be violence. I have no idea. I haven't seen any reports of any, plans of that nature at all. I was walking around Sunday afternoon on the mall, and I was walking down some of the parade route, and there's some major security. I mean, there were cop cars everywhere. There's walls being put up, fences for crowd control, but no boarding up of windows, like there was before, because I also remember, and in 2020, we saw a lot of destruction by Black Lives Matter of DC. And by the way, just historically, DC has suffered from a lot of violent protests for decades. You go back to a lot of riots, and in the Reconstruction period, for instance. And so DC has struggled with that. But in this particular case, I think the left is so crushed that they're having a hard time, getting motivated to get out of bed. I mean, honestly, they don't know if they're coming or going. I reported at Breitbart, I believe it was yesterday, that they finally are making an investment in a new messaging plan. And that messaging plan is going to center around trying to blame President Trump for Joe Biden's inflationary policies. And if you remember before, they were really focusing on democracy and abortion, which, didn't really play very well for them in the 2024 election. And so that's to say the Democrats are lost right now. And so that's why it's important for Donald Trump to come into office, move quickly, move strategically, and get these nominees confirmed.
Yeah, I think, and really he's got 2 years to do that, and the swamp doesn't want to go. So it is going to be a fight, and he's got to have all hands on deck. I think you're right. There's a real opportunity. And if he's successful in that, it's my thought that Republicans will have a much easier time, even in states like mine, California, Katie's, Virginia, to use that for momentum and to make progress. I would ask you about the Democrats and this Democrat recovery, because it seems like there is a lot of head scratching about just how this could have gone wrong, what went wrong, what went on, blaming Joe Biden, blaming Kamala Harris, blaming everything they can. But still, I'm seeing in California, I'm seeing it across the country, where people are just doubling down. Right now, my state has a special session of the state legislature going on, not dealing with wildfires, but dealing with Trump-proof in California. It's like they're doubling down on stupid. Nobody realized that they lost touch with the voter. They lost touch with the middle class. They lost touch with so many people with their policies. from what you're hearing, since you're hearing that there is kind of a reconfiguring of messaging, are they going to continue down that path of just doubling down on the old school way, which would be great for Republicans, or are they going to try to start reconnecting with voters again? Because I think they lost it. I mean, they really did.
Well, they have to connect with blue collar voters if they want to win elections. They lost their way, and that's pretty much due to President Trump. He reoriented the Republican Party. Before President Trump, it was, just a lot of big government. Mitt Romney, John McCain, George Bush, maybe very nice, sincere people, but they didn't connect with blue collar workers like President Trump did. He has totally realigned the party, and now the Democrat Party is seen as the elitist party. And I remember, waving signs for Mitt Romney on the side of the road. And, I remember people telling me, Mitt Romney is for the rich people. Well, that talking line or talking point doesn't really stick with Donald Trump. I mean, look at the way that he campaigned. You didn't see Kamala Harris going to a McDonald's drive-through window and serving Big Macs, but you did President Trump. You didn't see Kamala Harris getting, in a garbage truck to campaign, but President Trump did. So this political realignment is significant, and it needs to continue over the next 4 years.
So, Wendell, what's ahead for you? Are you going to be covering the Trump White House in the months ahead? Are you going to be covering Capitol Hill? What's up for you?
Breitbart is going to be right on the scene, and wherever the action is, Nick Gilbertson is our White House correspondent, and he's going to be right there in the White House press briefing room doing a great job. And Bradley Jay is going to be on Capitol Hill leading our coverage there. So we are ready to go, and you can read our stuff at Breitbart.com.
Absolutely. And Wendell, really, truly, thank you so much for what you do. Your writing is always incredible, always on the money with the stories that you bring to your readers. And again, check out Breitbart each and every day for all your latest news. Breitbart.com is the place to go. And you should follow Wendell as well. Wendell Husebo, Husebo, Wendell Husebo on all the social media platforms. Wendell, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you for your time today and taking us through all of these stories. The next couple of weeks are going to be exciting. That's for sure.
Thanks for having me on, ladies. You have a great day.
Thank you so much. All right. And don't forget, you got to get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. It's available wherever you get your books, or you can go to katiegorka.org. You can also search her out on Facebook. Find her when you search for Catherine Gorka, or on X, Gorka Katie. And you can find me on social media as well. Jennifer Horn Radio on Facebook and Instagram, and at Jennifer Horn on Truth and on X. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget those 5-star reviews and sharing Happy Women with your friends at SalemPodcastNetwork.com to connect with us on all of our platforms. It's another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.